And Councillor Krause, are you still in the queue on the report? You're good? Okay, Councillor Skaken.
Thanks, Mr. I'm not going to be too long on this report. I appreciate the work done. We've got lots to cover in this meeting. I'm concerned with the cost overruns. The parkade, and I can't recall the original what council voted on. Was that 12.5 million, Your Worship, to administration?
12.613 million is my recollection.
Okay, and from what was mentioned earlier, you said that Ms. Soltis, Your Worship, has the delegation of authority to increase the spending on the project. My first question would be, was the scope of the project changed, or is this to cover cost overruns?
Perhaps I'll kick it over.
Your Worship, it wasn't the scope changing. There was significant issues that they had planned to build the parkade in one phase, but there was fiber optics in the 6th Avenue, so they had to do it into 2 phases. They also had to do sheet piling instead of shotcrete, which they stabilized the bank, and they had to pump a horrendous amount of water out of there to stabilize that for the foundation. The plan was to build it originally to allow the water to come through. The water would be too great. The hydrostatic pressure would have collapsed the parkade, so they made it a bathtub. So there's a constant pumping mechanism to take that away. So those are some of the factors of the cost run. Plus, steel prices were vastly increased at that time with the Trump tariffs and things like that, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering how we got it so wrong, and I can appreciate the cost of labor and that have gone up. We hear that with every project. The 2nd Street Avenue Parkade last year, the year before, was 2 point something, went up to 5 because of increased costs. And I'm really challenged with this. We've had from the Willowcale Bridge, Your Worship, and other projects with significant cost overruns with in my mind, not a lot of clarity why those cost overruns are there, why they weren't included in the original budget, and having sat on the original committee that did the delegation of authority bylaw, from my opinion, the intent was never to allow the city manager to change the scope of the project or add millions of dollars to a project after council okayed the budget. So I'd personally like a report back, Your Worship, covering what Mr. Wells had said, and I want to see a breakdown on what the exact costs were, or what they are. And my understanding is the project isn't finished yet. Is that correct, Your Worship, to administration?
Your Worship, we're just a few weeks away from it being finished.
And then what costs have we incurred? This is till 2019, is it? The end of 2019?
Yes, Your Worship, till December 31st, 2019.
Okay, so what kind of costs have we incurred this year? Because I know the road, I don't know if it was dug up once, maybe twice. City forces, I think, were included in that, but what kind of costs have we incurred this year?
I wouldn't know that off the top of my head, but we could certainly bring that back.
Okay, so my concern is, Worship, and I've mentioned it, I'm so unhappy about these cost overruns. We talk about COVID hitting us and a number of other things, and we have millions of dollars, in my opinion, going out the door that should never have gone out the door. And I want to see, other than hiring a consultant to come in and tell us what we're doing with some of these projects and how we can do a better job, I want to report back on basically a complete breakdown on the cost of the parkade, Your Worship. And I'll put that out there. And thank you for the seconder. I think it's important not only for myself, but for the community. When people, and they're already talking about it, the parkade being, it's 6 million over budget now almost, with I'm sure a couple more million. We're going to be looking at $20 million parkade. When I vote on these things originally, I vote thinking we're going to come in pretty close to what we're saying, the procurement process and all that, and the community is watching us, and when they come back, we come back and say, oh, well, we have to throw another 6 million or 10 million into a project. I think that's unacceptable, and there's going to have to be some changes. So I want to see this report come back, Your Worship. I want to break down on cost, because this can't keep happening. There's absolutely no way, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay,
that's it for my questions on the report.
Okay, recommendation on the floor of Councillor Frizzell and Sampson. Councillor Frizzell on the recommendation. Okay, Councillor Sampson on the recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry, thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, Councillor Skaken, for this motion. I'll be supporting it. I also am frustrated with the overruns that we've been experiencing, and this parkade is nothing different with my frustration. A $12 million budget, $18 million total by the end of 2019, and we're into 8 months into the year and still not quite complete. I can imagine it's going to be a $20 million parkade. Now, I know this broke ground prior to my time on council, but if I was here at the time, I would never have been supportive of this if I had known that it was going to go over by $8 million plus. I guess these types of, my frustration stems from the future moving forward. We can often look back in the review mirror and see what we've done and be frustrated with it, but my frustrations are actually with what lies ahead with it, which is how can I believe when we get these proposals brought forward to council that they're going to be coming in on budget? How can I rightfully vote on something and believe that it is going to be done to scope and on budget? And the more and more of these we see, the harder that becomes, and that's not the position that I'd like to be in as a councillor. So I'll be supporting this, and I look forward to having this conversation further in our strat planning on how we can fix the problems we've been experiencing in the last few years on cost overruns. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor McConaughey, followed by Councillor Kraus. On the recommendation, Councillor?
Yes.
Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hall, and I also want to thank Councillor Skaken for his comments and putting this forward. I know costs have increased, and here it is. This is a significant overrun, again, as Councillor Skaken has mentioned. And I think my greatest concern is, even as great as the overrun is, the lack of being in touch as a city councillor and having the knowledge prior to it hitting an agenda. I know we have discussed in the past a goal to ensure that council is more kept up to date on infrastructure projects, where they're at, and potential overruns, as opposed to it slamming on the table in front of us and then having this conversation about looking in the rearview mirror. What did we, looking back, and as Councillor Sampson said, more importantly, going forward. We're here to be part of the solution. We're also here to provide oversight, and we're here on behalf of the people who elected us in these chairs. And so we're just doing our jobs by asking the questions and insisting that we are part of the whole process when it comes to these capital projects and overruns. And so I look forward to what my colleagues have to say. I appreciate this this motion, Councillor Skaken, and but just want to emphasize that moving forward, there has to be more communication outside of a city manager's ability to cover the cost. We need to have far more input. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kraus on the recommendation.
Well, thank you, Worship, and I guess just clarifying that we're just we're voting on a motion to have the report come back to council.
Correct.
Thank you. I'll be supporting it.
Councillor Ramsey on the recommendation.
Yes, on the recommendation, Your Worship. Thank you. I'll be supporting Councillor Skaken's motion this evening. I think it's incredibly important that this come back for us to review. This is one of the reasons why I moved that the delegation of authority be reviewed, just because I am a little uncomfortable with where it's at currently. This council approved a parkade for $12.6 million, and to get notified in the annual report that it's at 17.9, and that it's been approved under delegated authority. To me, it just doesn't sit well. So I'll definitely be supporting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Sampson, Ms. Soltis.
Your Worship, if I might, in November, there was a financial report on significant capital projects that went to the Finance and Audit Committee. And in that report, there was quite a lengthy table which showed all of our projects that had budgets of $1 million or more, and it showed the total budget together with the approved amendments. This project was in that list, Your Worship, And it had the approved amendments of, which included council's initial amendment to appropriately reflect this project in the capital financial budget bylaw. And it also included my amendment, Your Worship, which was probably close to $5 million, Your Worship, that I had done through delegated authority. So Finance and Audit Committee was aware of this delegated amendment that I made in November of last year, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey, you're good?
Yeah, I'll just say that I have expressed previously that I've been uncomfortable with the level of that the delegated authority is at for a while, and I'm glad that it got support from my council colleagues to come back. Thank you.
Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship. Sorry to jump back in. Just a question of clarification. This project began, I believe it was May of 2018, if I remember correct, prior to my time on council. I'm wondering if this is the total spend or if this is the total 2019 spend. I think I just want to.
Total spend to date as of December 31st, 2019, and that would include prior years.
Great, thanks very much for that clarification. And just with a comment, I did not see the report that would FNA as I wasn't at that meeting, so thanks, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have the recommendation on the floor. All those in favor of the recommendation, opposed, carried unanimously. And I'm going to take a 5-minute break, about 5 to 7, so that we can get set for our one and only public hearing this evening. But between now and then, we have still the annual report in front of us, and I'll go to Councillor Frizzell.